Hey, what's going on everybody? Gareth here with FCP Euro. Welcome back to another buyer's guide. Today, we're here and we're talking about the F30 Series. The F30 Series, what is it? Well, it's BMW's 6th generation 3 Series, and the 3 Series is a very, very well-known car amongst automotive enthusiasts and people who really want to own a BMW. It's usually the go-to car. That's the one that people want. Actually, the F30 Series is broken up into a couple of different submodels. So you have the F30, which is the sedan, the F31, which is the wagon, and the F34 GT, or Grand Touring, which is what happens when a mommy F30 and a daddy F31 get together and make a baby. Is it a sedan? Is it a wagon? Is it a hatchback? I think it's all three of those, to be honest with you. But they come in those three different basic body types, and we're gonna talk about those a little bit. The 3 Series, it's been BMW's bread and butter forever, and it's just super popular for both BMW enthusiasts and people who are looking to buy a BMW. It just kind of fits into that nice little range of a car that's capable, gives you the space you need, gives you the utility you need, but it's actually still fun to drive. And just within the 3 Series segment, there's a whole bunch of different competitors from other automotive manufacturers. You have Audi with the A4, Mercedes with the C-Class. I could even argue that Volkswagen with some of their bigger sedans like the Passat probably competes in that same space now. But even past that, you know, Jaguar's in that space, Alfa Romeo's in that space, Genesis, Lexus, I mean, Infiniti, it just goes on and on. So when it comes to the used market for the F30 Series, well, you have everything from the 2012, which is your first model year, all the way up to 2018 in the F30 and the F31, and 2019 for the F34 GT. Some of these cars are actually still under warranty because they were manufactured up to model year 2018 and 2019. But if you're looking at typical price ranges, I mean, it could be anywhere from sub $10,000 upwards of $30,000 to $40,000, depending on the trim level, depending on the car, depending on the options. I mean, there's a whole bunch of variances just within this model lineup. So there's a little bit for everybody, but you're gonna find cars with low mileage, you're gonna find cars with high mileage. I mean, they're all over the map at this point, simply because they are so new. So within the whole 3 Series lineup, there are a bunch of different submodels. And I think it's important to talk about the way that BMW does their modeling system, because within just the 3 Series, there's a whole list of cars underneath that kind of fall in line. And so usually when you look at the back of the emblem, that tells you the information you need to know. We're gonna go into a little bit deeper detail on that here in a little bit, but I wanna tell you about all the models that are available within this whole lineup. We're gonna go from the F30 all the way down to the F34. Within the F30, you have a whole bunch of different cars, and I think it's actually really important to note, we're only talking about US market vehicles. That doesn't include what's available in Canada. That does not include what's available in the rest of the world, because if we were doing that, we'd be here even longer, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So I'm only talking about cars that are available here in the US market. Simply put, the F30 is BMW's 6th generation 3 Series. So in the family tree, you got the E21 all at the beginning, F30, which is now the 6th generation. So with that said, the F30, the 4-door sedan, here we go. We got the 320i, the 320i xDrive, the 328i, the 328i xDrive, the 330i, the 330i xDrive, 330e, 335i, 335i xDrive, 340i, 340i xDrive, and the active hybrid 3, and the 328D and the 328D xDrive. Almost forgot that would have been a sin. That's a lot of models. So within the F31, which is gonna be your wagon, there's only 3 models available in the US market. That's all from 2014 to 2018. That's the 328i xDrive, 328D xDrive, and then the 330i xDrive. So only 3 flavors available in that one. So within the F34 GT, you kind of have a similar setup there. Not as many cars available. Globally, there'd be a lot more, but here in the US market, there was only 4 options through the entire cars lineup, which was the 328i GT xDrive, 330i GT xDrive, 335i GT xDrive, and 340i GT xDrive. Now, you'll probably notice one thing very important in all of those cars that I just listed. Only the F30 has the I models, which would be rear-wheel drive. Unfortunately, here in the US market, both the F31 wagon and F34 GT were only available in xDrive, but globally it is worth noting those cars were available in rear-wheel drive formats. I know I've just said a lot of information. It's all a bunch of numbers. And unless you're familiar with BMWs, it probably doesn't really make that much sense, right? I probably just sounded like an accountant just slapping off some numbers. But actually there is some method to the madness in the way that BMW does the numbering system. Between the chassis numbers and also the model numbers, there's a lot of information to be derived from that. And so we're gonna go ahead and get into that and explain what all of that means. BMW, starting in your mid-2000s, started to get really wide with the chassis numbers. And the reason for that is BMW started offering a whole bunch of different body types. Way back in the day, they would use one chassis code, which could be for multiple body types. So if we take it way back, an E36, for example, which would be your third generation 3 Series, was available in 5 different body types, but it was still an E36. But what BMW chose to do starting in the mid-2000s is for every single individual body type, it would have its own chassis code, which is basically a unique identifier. So like I said in the beginning, the F30 is the sedan, the F31 is your wagon, and your F34 is the hybrid of both of those cars, also known as the GT. So every single one of those chassis codes has its own unique identifier, being a specific body type. When it comes to the badge on the back of the car, or actually any of the badges on the car, there's actually a lot of information to be learned from that. They're not random numbers, there is some method to the madness. So using, let's say, a 328i as an example. The 3 stands for the series, in this case a 3 Series. 28 is basically a drivetrain that is installed in the car, and the I stands for fuel injection. Now in the case of a car that has D on it, that's going to be for diesel injection. And then a car that has an xDrive badge on it, that's identifying that the car has BMW's xDrive system, which is all-wheel drive. If it doesn't have a badge, it's either been removed or it's rear-wheel drive. Of course, you can always check by seeing if there's axles in the front, but that is the general method to the madness. And also another thing with that too is generally the lower the number, the smaller the engine or the least amount of power it has, the higher number, the more power, and generally it also is a expense range as well. So a equally equipped 328 is not going to be as expensive as an equally equipped 335. So it's basically identifying a trim level, a drivetrain, and all things being equal, a 335 and a 328 are going to be at different price points. So now that we've explained the model numbers and what they represent, hopefully that's a little bit less confusing now, but let's talk about what the second 2 digits represent, which of course is the drivetrain that's installed in the vehicle, which of course is, well, almost everything to somebody who is really interested in what car they're buying. So within that, we have the 20i and the 28i, which is going to be a N20 powered BMW. There's 2 different variations of that engine, a low output version and a high output version. So your 20i has a lower output N20 and your 28i has a high output version of that N20. However, it is worth noting that within the 28i for your 328i's, there's both a SULEV and non-SULEV version. So the SULEV is going to be the N26 and the non-SULEV is going to be the N20. Something to be aware of on that because there are some emissions components and extended warranty things that go on with that engine. So when you're shopping for any 328i or any variant of a 328i, definitely check to see what engine's installed in that because you may or may not want it based on what engine's installed in there. Just giving you a fair heads up warning. Moving forward to the 28D, anything that says 28D or 28D xDrive, that's going to be the N47N turbo diesel engine. Not too common to find. They are around, but that is not as common of a trim vehicle as you'll probably find in the buyer's market. They're out there, but nowhere near as common as the other variants. You have your 30i cars, which you're typically going to find in all of your facelift vehicles. That's going to be the B46 engine, which is a modular 4-cylinder engine that BMW is now currently using in all production moving forward. You have your 35i, which is your N55 6-cylinder twin power turbo engine, which is a fancy way of saying it's a twin scroll turbo. And then moving forward from there, you have your 40i, which is going to be the B58 modular turbo 6-cylinder engine, which if you know anything about the B58, well, you already know, but the B58 is a very impressive 6-cylinder engine for BMW. Tuning potential is unlimited, so if you're in the market for a vehicle where you're looking to make more than stock power or something that you can play around with, that is probably going to be the choice that you're going to go with. And that particular engine is only available in the facelift models. And then you kind of have your strange cars like the Active Hybrid 3 and your 30E cars. The 30E is going to be the B46 engine coupled with some hybrid components, and your Active Hybrid 3 is going to be the N55, again, coupled with some hybrid components. The Active Hybrid 3 and your 30E, or the 330E, you're not really going to find those too often. They are out there, but those are very low numbers, and you're not really going to find those too often on that used market. So now we talked about the engines, let's talk about the other aspect of those engines, which are the transmissions. To be honest with you, there isn't really that much variation on transmissions on this. For the F30, this is where you start to see BMW go away from manual transmissions being kind of a common thing in the 3 Series, and you start to see the 8 HP automatic from ZF being the common transmission being used across the board. So when you look at it, the 8 HP 45 is the transmission of choice from BMW. It's a fantastic transmission. And I really hate to say it, within the F30 lineup, the automatic is honestly the way to go, just in terms of the way it shifts, the way it performs. The manual transmission variants, while they are out there on the market, they don't really feel that great compared to some of the older BMW transmissions, but really you're gonna see a combination of Getrag and ZF manual boxes, both in 6-speed configuration being available. But when you're looking at the used market, you're going to typically see automatic versions of this car available more than manual transmissions. The manuals are out there, so for those of you that still want to manually shift, it's still there, but you're not going to find as many cars in the trim that you want with a manual transmission. You're gonna have to search a lot harder because the automatic was used pretty much for a majority of the production. And then to kind of take this one step further past the transmission, in the case of cars with xDrive, the transfer case is completely separate from the transmission in typical BMW fashion. So if you ever had a transfer case issue, or you were looking at a car that, let's say, did have a transfer case issue, that is a serviceable component separately from the transmission. But I think it is worth mentioning that at least on those cars, the system is a little bit more sophisticated because you do have the transfer case, you have another drive shaft that goes to the front, and then you have a differential bolted to the side of the oil pan. So there's a couple of additional wear components on your xDrive cars that you're not going to see on a typical rear-wheel drive car. And so when you're in the market looking for an all-wheel drive vehicle, you are going to be wanting to look for one where that front drive shaft is in good shape, where the U-joints haven't worn out because they're not serviceable, where the front differential is not making any type of noise, and the transfer case is functioning properly. If it's a very high mileage vehicle, those are just some things to be aware of, because oftentimes those things are neglected through their service life, because simply put, they're not serviced. BMW doesn't put a service interval on those components. So if you're in the market for an xDrive car, just be on the lookout for those things. Make sure the car is properly inspected and everything checks out before you go ahead and pull the trigger on one. In the world of BMW, let's talk about the aesthetics of the car. That's, well, these days a very controversial topic, but we're going to keep it only on the F30s. The F30 sedan, the F31 wagon, and the F34 GT, which we have all 3 variants behind us today in the studio. And I think it's important to note that every single one of these cars had a pre-facelift and a facelift option available. And the facelift in the world of BMW is LCI, which stands for Life Cycle Impulse. Anytime you see the chassis plus LCI, that means the car is a facelifted car, which usually has to do with aesthetics being changed, maybe some different headlight options. Sometimes you see some different interior equipment being available. But for the most part, while some of the aesthetics change, most of the stuff underneath the car remains pretty much close to being the same. But let's talk about the model years in which these cars were available. So your F30 pre-LCI is going to be available from 2012 to 2015. And then the LCI, or the F30 LCI, is going to be available from model year 2016 to 2018. The F31 wagon pre-LCI is going to be available from 2014 to 2015, and the F31 LCI from 2016 to 2018. The F34 GT, the sedan wagon hatchback hybrid, available from 2014 to 2015 in your pre-LCI, and then 2016 to 2019 in the LCI variant. And I think there's one thing that's really important to note about BMW's change on these cars is pretty much the most common, most standard update that BMW is going to give you on your LCIs are going to be pretty much bumper cover changes, some cosmetic tweaks like that, and there's also some different lighting packages that become available. So on the LCI vehicles, you still have base halogen headlights available. You also have xenon adaptive headlights available, but this is when you start to see BMW foray into LED lighting technology, which is only going to be available on the LCI cars. So if you want the fanciest, up-to-date, most expensive headlights ever, your 2016 plus F30s are going to be what's for you. Another thing to note about all of these cars is some of the exterior appointments on them, such as the M Sports package, which is going to be the most aggressive front end fascia that you can see, slightly lower ride height, bigger wheels, even some interior options being different, so sports seats and a sport wheel. You have cars that go everywhere from your base sort of interior, which would be no sunroof and manually adjustable seats, which we have one of those cars behind us today, to a fully appointed interior with the electronics package, with the iDrive, and everywhere in between. BMW kind of went really wide on these cars and sort of gave everything to everybody. If you wanted a base model car with very few features, you can get it. If you wanted a fully loaded everything, you have that option. It's really the first time you start to see BMW offer several different trim levels and packages with the F30. So again, a little bit of everything for everybody. And the nice part about it is, probably with the exception of the 320i, your M Sport packages and the M interiors and the sport seats and all that kind of stuff, that could be available in pretty much any car that you would buy. Another thing to consider on all of these F30s is they have multiple different brake packages available on these cars, which makes it extremely complicated for customers to choose repair parts for these vehicles, because I don't even really know how to put this. You can have upwards of 3 different options available for one car, which is crazy. This is the first time actually in BMW history where you see this on the 3 Series. Before, brakes were pretty much standard for the car that it was installed on. You didn't have rotor options, you didn't have caliper options. Pretty much the brakes that came on the car, that's all that was. But now you have BMW equipping these cars with, your typical standard style brakes, which are your, floating calipers on a standard brake caliper carrier, to Brembo fixed position calipers and semi-floating rotors. It gets a little crazy, leave it at that. And to take it one step further and make it one step more complicated, you then have dealer installed brake package options, which is part of BMW Performance line, which is like a sub-brand for genuine BMW parts. You can get a dealer installed brake package or buy the kit and install yourself, which gives you like the biggest brakes possible that may never have been installed on that car. And so when it comes time for you to buy, you really have to know what brakes are installed on the car. And usually you could do that by VIN, unless the car has one of those BMW Performance brake kits installed, which in that case, you might need to measure some rotors, you might need to do some double checking. But for the most part, literally on the F30, you have a huge range of brakes available, which makes it a little bit complicated, but at the same time is also kind of cool because you start seeing some performance brakes being installed by BMW at the factory and by the dealer. And I gotta be honest with you, it's actually kind of cool on the other level as an enthusiast when you see 370mm rotors tucked behind the wheels of like a 328i. It doesn't logically make any sense, but it looks pretty cool. And I think a really good example of this is we have a F30 328i on the lift right now. It's that dark blue car behind us. That actually has the BMW Performance brake kit, the dealer installed or dealer purchased aftermarket or BMW aftermarket brake kit. That has 370mm front rotors on it, which would normally be available on the stock M Performance or factory installed big brake kit for the 335. So if you're looking at those calipers and you were just looking at the factory options, you might get trapped in buying the 340mm 328i rotors instead of buying the 370mm rotors that brake package requires. If you have these cars, you always want to make sure what those rotor sizes are. You want to know what's installed in the car because you can kind of get into the realm of buying brake kits, buying brake rotors and pads, and getting stuff that isn't correct. So whenever you're ordering brake parts for these cars to do basic maintenance, just be 100% on point with what you have first, and you won't run any problems down the road. So moving on from brakes, let's talk about some of the suspension options on these cars. The suspension is kind of typical BMW in the 3 Series lineup. So it's a double wishbone front suspension, so 2 lower control arms, and it's a multi-link rear suspension, 5 control arms on each side, or what is known as a semi-trailing arm rear suspension. We have a complete video that talks about some of the diagnosis, the things that you need to know about the suspensions on these cars, at least on the axle suspension. But when it comes to struts and shocks, those are very often a vehicle-specific thing. Springs, specifically in the world of BMW, if you need factory replacement springs, you always have to order them by VIN, because it is the vehicle installed options. Things like a navigation unit or a module or something like that, something small, imperceivable, something that doesn't even make any sense, can actually change the springs that are installed in the car. So it's not really possible to just order these things like this just fits 335s. A 335i, for example, can have 10 different front springs or 8 different rear springs, and those are all assigned by option to the car. Fortunately, here at FCP Europe, we have the ability to tell you which spring actually fits your car. So if you're in that situation where you need something as simple as a coil spring, we can help you out on that. And when it comes to the struts and shocks, similar situation. You have standard suspension cars, sports suspension cars, or even cars with VDC, which is a electronic style damping suspension. Those components, again, can be very difficult to tell without the VIN. Well, not the VDC, you'll see an electrical connector coming out of that, but even within that, you could have sports suspension options or M Sport suspension options. So when it comes to like basic maintenance like that, replacing shocks and struts, you often need to order that stuff or double check by VIN first as to what fits, because again, very similar to brakes, you can run into the situation of getting yourself in the corner where you have the wrong parts. So always want to double check ahead of time when ordering parts to make sure you have the correct ones. And also, one more thing about the suspensions on these cars. The front strut mounts actually have a variance on them based on production date. Earlier production cars are going to be mounted with 3 bolts. Later production cars are mounted with 5 bolts. So when you're ordering strut mounts, do that visual check ahead of time. Make sure you're ordering the correct one. And one more interesting fact about those, this actually catches out a lot of people. Those strut mounts from the factory are not pre-tapped, so there's no threads in them. You have to use the bolts to cut the threads. They're use self-tapping bolts. That's honestly the way a lot of cars are being manufactured now. It's one less step on the manufacturing process of that strut mount. And when you install the new strut mount in the car with the strut, you have to use the bolts. And basically the bolts will cut the threads at the same time. So if you get one of those things and you look at it and you're like, what is this? It's totally normal. That's the way it's supposed to be. And before we get too deep into the weeds, I think this is a good segue to say that we have a pretty good solid selection of both diagnosis, engine mechanical related and chassis related DIY videos and blog content to help you work and maintain one of these cars. That's an ever expanding collection of content, so if you don't see what you want to see today, that could be available potentially tomorrow. So at the time of filming this, we're still working on some of the newer stuff. We hope you learned a lot about the F30 today. We did cover everything at a very high level and very generically, so if you have any specific questions or comments, or first-hand ownership experience on anything F30 related, leave in the comment box below. We'll be happy to see that and get back to you. Hit that like button if you like this video, and also hit subscribe. We have a lot more videos on the way. And as always, we'll see you for the next one. Thank you for watching.